Todd McLellan out, Ken Hitchcock in. Oilers win their first game against the San Jose Sharks. Not sure if there's any clues in there about how Hitchcock is going to coach this team, but your thoughts on Ken Hitchcock taking over behind the bench in Edmonton?
I was surprised simply because you're sitting there thinking of all the people that they could go to, and Hitchcock was not the person that you think of because, quote unquote, he was retired. But a few people I spoke to yesterday said that you can't take that seriously because Ken Hitchcock, there's nothing he wants to do more than coach. And maybe he is, quote unquote, retired.
Yeah.
But if an opportunity to go back behind the bench presents itself, everybody knows that that's what Ken Hitchcock wants and lives for and craves to do.
What's the line from Hotel California? Check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Is that Ken Hitchcock?
I think that's a pretty fair way to put it. It's a great line. I wish I would have put it in the blog if I would have thought about that. He is wired to do this. He's not a consultant. He's not somebody who's going to sit there and take notes. He'll do it if he's paid to do it, but what he wants to be is in the middle of the action. And there's no question that he was watching those games and saying, I can fix this, or telling anyone who would listen, I can fix this. And I don't think that the Edmonton Oilers are going to change their coaching staff or their coach for anyone who they didn't think could get them to the playoffs. And if Joel Quenneville's not available, and you have to believe that either they didn't want to or couldn't get him, Ken Hitchcock is the kind of guy, his history has proven, he gives your team a jolt right away. And that's what the Edmonton Oilers are hoping for, the jolt that gets them into the postseason.
Describe that jolt. And listen, the roadway or the pathway for success with Edmonton is there in a lot of ways. A couple of reasons. One, the Pacific is a jump ball right now. No one seems to want to grab the Pacific. We've talked about that in the podcast previous. And two, they just played their first game against a Pacific Division rival on Saturday. Like, that was the first game that Edmonton played against someone in their division. So they can make up a lot of space. They can make up a lot of ground. They can do a lot of damage really quickly here. Picked up their first win against the San Jose Sharks. They have Anaheim on Friday. And then, this last, 3 quarters of the season, a lot of it is against Pacific Division rivals. So it's there for them. But what's this jolt?
The jolt is that their goals against go down. If you take a look at every single one of his previous jobs, the first year or close to full year he gets with a team, they have big drops in goals against. It happened in Dallas. It happened in Philadelphia. It happened in Columbus. It happened in St. Louis. It happened again last year in Dallas. 2 years ago, the Stars had the worst penalty kill, I believe, in NHL history, since they kept the numbers. It was 71%. Last year, it was top 5 until Ben Bishop got hurt in March. That's the jolt. He makes you uncomfortable. He gets on you. You remember when we tied Jason Spezza on, and he talked about how good Jim Montgomery was in the film meetings?
He's holding your attention. There's no preferential treatment to anybody in our locker room. He's trying to teach us from the ground up. He's got a unique system, and he wants us to play a certain way, and he's holding your attention. I've been really impressed with the confidence that he's come in with and his ability to explain what he wants. And I think that's been, when a guy comes in with confidence, you've seen that before, but the way that he can portray his message and get it through to us and explain himself has been really impressive. I think he's got a great future.
I asked a couple of players, what's the difference between Montgomery and Hitchcock? And they said that, Hitchcock, he still loved to challenge you. He would come right at you, and he would expect you to come back at him and give it back to him. And he's going to be all over these guys. He said it yesterday. He said it after the game last night. My first year at Hockey Night, we called it the headliner then.
Yeah.
The first headliner I ever did as a Hockey Night in Canada employee was Ken Hitchcock coaching Stars in Philadelphia, what it was like to coach guys like Jeremy Roenick and things like that. And, it was $5. And so after the piece aired, one of the players, I saw them a little bit later, and he said to me, "You missed the big question." And I go, "What's the big question?" And they said, he knows that on stoppages in play, the camera's on him. He doesn't say a word. And then the moment the play starts, he's all over you. He is, because he knows you guys aren't looking at him. And you watched that game last night, our coverage of that game in San Jose. It happens. They show him in a break, and he looks pretty calm. But he will grind those guys. And obviously they feel that's what they need. I still wonder, though, Jeff.
Pat Quinn was the same way, by the way.
Yes.
He knew that trick.
I wonder if they compared notes since they coached together. But Pat, the other thing, too, is that their roster is the issue as much as the coach. And they want to check and they want to be more structured. Even with that, are they going to be good enough?
Well, here's the question, too, and this is the kick it upstairs question. Did the Oilers get caught? Did they get caught in, we have Connor McDavid, but our roster construction, not unlike before when Jason Botterill took over. They were kind of caught in this rebuild, but the rebuild was from 5 to 10 years previous. Big, lumbering, strong, aggressive team as opposed to quick, nimble, up-tempo hockey. Like, I have the same question that you do, Elliotte. The composition question. Do they have the horses to win in this NHL 218-219? I don't know. They have one in McDavid. They have one in Draisaitl. They have a handful of other players that I think can be successful in the game right now. How deep does that go, though?
Well, if you watch their game, it was interesting. One of the other executives in the league said to me, we're going to know right away with one guy, and that's Drake Caggiula. It's going to be interesting because Caggiula had entered Hitchcock's tenure playing with McDavid and Draisaitl. And Caggiula's not a big guy, and Hitchcock likes heavy hockey. Like, he's a big believer in heavy hockey. But he said Caggiula's competitive, so he was curious to see how he would do under Hitchcock. Caggiula played 7 minutes above his average in the first game. Yeah. All right, so maybe Hitchcock thinks he's got a piece here. The most interesting thing to me was that third line, that Brodziak, Lucic, Kassian line. Brodziak was 4 minutes above his average. Kassian was 3. And Lucic was about 4 minutes under his average, but he put him out there consistently on that line. That is a Ken Hitchcock line. He would, this, he would love those 3 guys together.
Aggressive forecheck, face up against the glass.
Can he get anything out of them? Like, to me, $10, that's a big question in, can he get something out of that roster? Could he take a Brodziak, Kassian, Lucic line and get something out of it? Because clearly, early on, that's one of his gambles. And you know what? Koskinen's the goalie now, too.
He's the number one guy?
He's the number one guy.
Period.
Well, he could have blown that game last night, and he held on. I think he's your guy.
The team was resilient. Go down a puck, tie. Go down a puck, tie. Go down a puck, tie. Win in overtime. We will do Ask 31 a little bit later in the podcast, but as a preview, this comes in from Reese Albrecht. Elliotte, please elaborate on quote, and McLellan didn't take it quietly.
I think he was upset. Look, like, nobody likes to be fired. These guys have pride. Todd McLellan, you look at the job about being the president of the United States. You take a look at Bill Clinton from when he took over to when he left. George Bush from when he took over to when he left. Barack Obama from when he took over to when he left. Those guys were all 2-term presidents. And they aged more than 8 years. Todd McLellan reminded me of a U.S. president. If you look at him from the day he took over as head coach of the Edmonton Oilers to the day he was fired, he aged a lot more than 3.5 years. And because losing sucks, it wears on you. And regardless of what you think about McLellan as a coach, he poured his heart and soul into it. He really cared. And I'm sure not everything that happened was what he wanted to happen. And, this year was really hard. That whole organization, from the business side to the hockey side, it's been a hard place to work for the last year because of a lot of things that have happened behind the scenes. And also because the team is losing. And I just think he was frustrated about some of the moves that were made. that he was getting fired. Nobody likes to be fired. And I think he just let his frustrations known.
What's next then for Todd McLellan? Right now, hey, pause, step down, off to Kelowna, enjoy yourself, relax. Rob Blake played for him.
Yep.
Los Angeles has an interim. You look at St. Louis. We'll get to Mike Yeo here in a couple of seconds. Doug Armstrong, I believe, interviewed him before he ended up taking the Edmonton job. There could be a fit there if at the end of the season they make a decision and it isn't just Craig Berube or someone else. Like, what's next for Todd McLellan? I can't believe that, I've just been through the ringer and I'm done.
Oh, I think he'll be in the mix in some places. I don't doubt that. This didn't work, but he's been a good coach for a long time and he's smart. I have a lot in this blog this week about the future of coaching. And one of the more interesting conversations I've had, it's not just one conversation, but I guess it's a thread through several different conversations, Jeff, is that people are sitting here and starting to think the next generation, this millennial group, the most important thing is, can you coach them? And we've seen 3 NCAA coaches in the last couple of years get jobs. We've seen we know AHL guys coach young players. Guys are telling me those guys, whether at the junior level or the college level or the AHL level, or if you're in the NHL with young teams, they're going to get talked to. And I have a feeling that some of these searches will be larger than ones we've seen in the past. And I'm not saying any of these guys are going to get jobs, but they're going to be talked to for ideas and see if they can idea their way into a position that they may not have gotten already.
Rocky Thompson, Chicago.
Rocky Thompson is on that list.
Sheldon Keefe, Toronto Marlies.
Sheldon Keefe. I'll tell you, I don't have
Tim Hunter, Moose Jaw.
Canadian World Junior Coach this year.
Yep.
Like those guys, Andre Tourigny from Ottawa was mentioned to me. Pascal Vincent from AHL Manitoba. Dean Evison, who was in Milwaukee for a while, and is now on the bench in Minnesota. From NHL teams, they mentioned Hiller and Smith from Toronto, Kirk Miller from Montreal, especially because Montreal, with a kind of youngish team, their offense is starting to go this year. They look like they got a chance, and on a good team, everything rises. But those Nate Lehman from NCAA Providence was another name I got told. You're going to see a lot of these guys get interviewed simply because teams want to hear what they have to say.
We'll conclude on this one. Get your thought on it, whether you agree or disagree. Tuesday on Hockey Central at noon, Nick Kypreos said, and I am paraphrasing, it's Ken Hitchcock's job now to save Peter Chiarelli's job. Agree or disagree?
I think there's a lot to that.
Last bullet for Peter Chiarelli?
Probably.
And that will begin the podcast. This is 31 Thoughts, the podcast, brought to you by the all-new 2018 GMC Sierra Denali. Elliotte, before we talk about another coaching dismissal around the NHL, this one in St. Louis, what's up with the Hockey Night jacket? If you're watching us on YouTube, there's a old Hockey Night jacket behind us.
I am so excited to wear this.
Very cool.
And the only thing I would ask is one day they bring back the orange ones too.
Oh, I forgot about those. Those
were the CFL jackets mainly, and I don't know if they wore those on Hockey Night, but they wore them on the CFL and they wore them on CBC Sports Weekend, which was our World Weather Sports of Canada. But the one I remember is, I believe it was Scott Oake. I'd have to double check this with him, but I believe it was him. When he was working sidelines on the CFL on CBC, he interviewed Gizmo Williams, the great Gizmo Williams. Yeah. And for those of you who are in the States who might not know who he was, Henry Gizmo Williams was an outstanding kick and punt returner for the Edmonton Eskimos, one of the best we've ever seen and one of my favorite players in any sport ever. And he returned a kick for a touchdown, and Scott interviewed him on the sidelines, and he goes, in the middle of the interview, if I get another one, I want your jacket. And Scott Oake said, if you get another one, you get the jacket. And he did it. He ran back another one during the game, and he went right over to Okie, and he said, I'm getting your jacket. And he goes, yeah, you are. Awesome. But I have to tell you, we're going to be wearing these on Saturday night.
Very cool.
It's a real honor. They asked us to autograph one each, I guess, for the office, or it's being auctioned off. I'm not sure. And I just wrote on it, it's a real honor to wear this. And I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Dave Hodge, Brian McFarland, Howie Meeker, the legends.
We're not worth it. This would be something interesting to talk to you about. I know you want to. We are auctioning them off. That's right, for Hockey Fights Cancer, and
Yes.
all the links will be available. We'll make them aware to you. But so I know I'm going off track here, and we don't have a ton of time, but I do want to talk about this with you, and I think it fits because we have the jacket here. So there's a story I tell about my beginning on Hockey Night in Canada. So I was hired in October of 2003, and our first game was a Thursday night game. It was Montreal at Ottawa. And Martin Havlat was unsigned by the Sanders at the time. So they said to me, Elliotte, your first appearance is going to be at 7:02, 2 minutes into the show, and you're going to interview John Muckler about this contract dispute. And I remember standing outside the Sanders dressing room in the hallway with Muckler, and the music came on, and I almost froze.
Yeah.
And that was the previous music when we still had it. And I was, honestly, Jeff, if they had come to me at that moment, I don't know if I would have been able to do it, because all of a sudden I was sitting there and I was thinking, what am I doing here?
I had same.
And so I turned to Muckler and I said to him, this must be the first time the guy interviewing you is more nervous than you are. And Muckler, who by that point had already seen everything, looked at me and goes, I doubt it. And that broke the ice for me. But I remember my whole first year at Hockey Night, and it still happens now. It's Hockey Night in Canada. It's been on the air more than 60 years. You don't want to be the guy that ruins the show. And I always say to Arash Madani, there's things I say elsewhere that I would never say on the show, because there's always a bit of a governor in terms of how I treat it because of all the history. Same or different?
Gold standard for broadcasters, sports broadcasters in this country. It's interesting the way that in the United States, agree, disagree, Saturday night, generally a television wasteland. Americans generally don't congregate around the television on Saturdays.
They don't try.
In Canada, the opposite. Everybody gathers around the television. Now the tablets. That has been the zenith. That's the top of Mount Everest in our profession. You get on Hockey Night in Canada, you have Hockey Night in Canada on your business card, on your resume, in a lot of ways. That's it. That's where many of us, I include myself in that as well, that's where we all aspire. That is the spot. And I can recall my first game was December 29th. We talked about this with Jason Spezza. Here's my first walk-off. My first hits was on the pregame show. I was in Ottawa. It was Washington against the Ottawa Senators. You were in Toronto.
Okay.
I can't remember who Toronto was playing. Don't remember. Ron opens it up, and there's double boxes. There's you in Toronto, and there's me in Ottawa. And he says, Elliotte Friedman is standing by in Toronto. The Maple Leafs are facing off against blah, 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 blah. But first, welcome to Hockey Night in Canada from HNIC Radio to speak to, I was with Alexander Ovechkin interview. In conversation with Alexander Ovechkin, please welcome to Hockey Night, Jeff Merrick. And there was that. And it, to me, Elliotte, it seemed like an eternity, but it was probably about half a second, maybe, that what am I doing here? And everything, all those Saturday nights, mom and dad, all of it, on the couch, watching Hockey Night in Canada, all of it, right in that second. And one of my thoughts is, I can't believe this is actually happening. What am I doing here? I don't really belong here. And it was really quickly, thanks, Ron. So, Alex.
Yes.
No idea what, and I've never gone back to watch it. No idea what I said. No idea what the, but I did have that half second of, I don't belong here. This is, I'm punching above my weight.
I remember that. And I still have moments where I'm thinking, careful here. You're fooling around with something that's much bigger than you. All right, let's move on.
We talked about the situation in Edmonton. What about the situation in St. Louis?
Everybody kind of saw this coming. It was really tough. St. Louis came through here a few weeks ago, and you could see it. It was wearing on everyone there. What I thought was really interesting about it is, well, we've got 3 jobs now that are interims.
Yeah.
The Blackhawks have committed to Jeremy Culleton. I actually double-checked this with Stan Bowman yesterday. I sent him a text and said, is he your coach? And he says, yes, and we believe in him. So he's got as much guarantee as a coach can get in this business.
Right.
the thing that's interesting about St. Louis, so you've got Berube, and Doug Armstrong said, we've got our full support behind him, but we're going to go on a search. And they sound like they're going to have a big search. He mentioned Europe. He mentioned, exhaustive investigative things. So there's no guarantee. The one thing that was pointed out to me was when Berube was the coach in the American Hockey League, 3 of their key prospects, Barbashev, Blais, who was a late-round pick, and Vince Dunn, who they were really counting on big things this year, played very well for him. And I think that played into the whole thing. But the other thing I just have to say is that for the second time at least, and the media did a good job there in St. Louis of reminding Doug Armstrong of it, he has said this might be the last chance for this core. And I know that the name that people are wondering about is Tarasenko. And the reason is the Blues, it's been hinted that the Blues always haven't been happy with him since he signed his extension. Mm-hmm. Now, no one's ever said that on the record to me. I've never heard his name in a specific trade rumor, but it's kind of been out there that they expect more. And I do wonder if we could get to the point where he does become available.
That's fast. We've seen we just talked about Ken Hitchcock a couple of seconds ago. We saw significant conflict between those two, and we just said, well, that's Ken Hitchcock rubbing up against a player the wrong way. We've seen it before. To your point about, this might be it for that core. They've run out of chances. I think the line by Doug Armstrong this week was, this core is out of equity now.
Yes.
Like, you do get the sense that they are at their wits' end, which is interesting because I looked at St. Louis this year and I said, I don't know that I expect a whole lot out of the gate because they've had a lot of turnover in a lot of key positions. And the weird thing about the Yeo situation is, as much as normally you would look at it and point at goaltending, lately Jake Allen's been good. And the reason, that they're getting blanked is they just can't score. Mm-hmm. Like lately, where have all the goals gone?
It's not happening. Yes.
So I do wonder about that point, how much equity is left, if any, and then what the next moves are. But
he's not afraid. Armstrong is not afraid.
It's the first time I've heard Tarasenko, though.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, $15. A couple of years ago, there was a time I got radioed, and I said, I think in Calgary, that it was in the playoffs, and one of the things the Blues were talking about was they just didn't feel. I don't like to make fun of anyone else's conditioning because my own is so bad as I sit here eating cookies. That they were upset about conditioning. They felt that he could be better, and it went everywhere. And I was like, "Oh my God!" And someone in the media from St. Louis called me, and I was like, "Oh, is this going to be a story?"
Yeah.
And they're like, $20. They're saying, we've heard all the same things. So it's kind of been around there, but it's a big difference between, as being frustrated with somebody and actually looking at this spectacular talent and saying, we're going to move them. Big difference.
Let's move on. We already did talk about Edmonton, but I want to rewind to last Saturday night.
Okay.
Old school.
Yes.
Edmonton Oilers, Calgary Flames. Every time the Battle of Alberta comes up, it's marketed the same way. There's pictures and videos of fights, and there's jerseys getting tossed in the crowd, and there's big Grant Fuhrer windmill saves, and Dave Semenko, and Tim Hunter, and Jim Poplinski, and it kind of hasn't been that for a long time.
Long time.
That changed on Saturday.
It was great.
With Bennett and Nurse right out of the gates.
And Kachuk, yes. Well, and how about Darnell Nurse yelling at the linesman to let us fight?
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic and where that's going. But first of all, did it not seem to you that there were a lot of Oiler fans in that building? When I saw some of the goals early, it looked, maybe it was just the camera angles we shot, and we all know that TV can completely distort reality because we participate in it.
I was going to say.
But I looked at it and said, there's a lot of Oiler fans in this building. But anyway, there was hate in that game. And if you're part of the John Tortorella, there's not enough hate train, which I think we are both on.
Sure.
That was something different. And when you went into Calgary, win or lose, there was a time where you were going to get roughed up either way. It was a tough building and a tough team. And as the league has changed, the team has changed. It's very different. But Bennett and Tkachuk, they reignited it. And Nick and Kelly, they weren't happy that Tkachuk turtled in the one point.
The guy chasing him?
Yes. I wouldn't want to fight Kassian either. And plus, he'd already been out of the game once.
Yeah. Now, Tkachuk's a big guy.
He is a big guy. But Kassian is out of his league. Yeah. The one thing that was interesting to me is, and I remembered it, I heard one of the players told me that they think that someone on Edmonton said something to Tkachuk about, you do that and someone's going to get you. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of Mike Richards. Mike Richards, when he played for Philadelphia, told the story of Sergei Brylin and Patrick Elias telling that to him. Mm-hmm. If you continue to do that, someone's going to get you. And Matthew Tkachuk, he's going to get paid. He is a great player. I just think the Oilers were left with a really sour taste, and it's not only because they lost. Even the media got into it.
Where I saw that afterwards, that was interesting sidebar. Where are you at with where Matthew Tkachuk's decimal point is going to be?
I look at Calgary is going to want to keep him under Gaudreau.
Sure.
But
keep him under the Gaudreau, Giordano ceiling.
It's tough now because the cap has gone up, right? And look what everybody's signing for. And here's the thing. So we had Mike Liut on, and he talked about how his guys like Rantanen and Laine are happy to wait to the end of the year to take their time. Yeah. But some of the other guys, like Tkachuk is still there. Aho hasn't signed yet. The GMs were telling me that they believe that they're all waiting for Nylander. Where does Nylander go? Why would you sign if he actually gets 8? Mm-hmm. Or even 7 something? Why would you sign before that to see and make sure?
So he's going to be the measuring stick.
If he signs in the next 10 days, yes.
Do you have a feeling? This is a sidebar. Do you have a feeling on that one way or another?
Not right now. No, I don't. It's not going anywhere. But we're about to get into okay.
Yeah.
Are you all in or are you folding? And we're going to find out from everybody involved in the next week.
Back to the Calgary Flames, but off Matthew Tkachuk, and who, by the way, and we've talked about this before on the show, he's the heartbeat of that team in a lot of ways.
I think Bennett has a chance to get up there, too.
That's where I want to get to.
Yeah.
I want to get to Sam Bennett, because whenever we do a Calgary Flames game on Wednesday nights, and we're doing one tonight.
Yes, we are.
Winnipeg and the Winnipeg Jets and the Calgary Flames, we will have a conversation either on the air or in the green room about Sam Bennett and what is he? And what's he going to become? And where's the spot for Sam? What type of player is this guy going to be? Is he a third-line guy that has first-line aspirations? Is he a first-line guy that's played his way down the lineup? Who is Sam Bennett?
He is a guy who was drafted 4th overall. And you take a look at that draft. It was Ekblad 1, it was Reinhart 2, it was Draisaitl 3, and it was Bennett 4. And when you're drafted that high, you tend to look at maybe points that other people get and you say, oh, I'm not there, or I'm not that, and it bugs you. Sometimes you have to sort of rediscover what your goals are or what you are. And I see Sam Bennett as a guy who can be a 15-year player in the National Hockey League as a second or third line center, maybe even first in the right situation, who grinds you and annoys you and scores 20 goals and gets 50 points a year. He can have a hell of a career. Yeah. The guy who played on Saturday night is a guy who can be a difference maker in the National Hockey League. Sometimes you just need to reset your goals. And if someone the beginning of the season this year, Evander Kane, I can't remember who he was mad at. He was mad at somebody in a San Jose Calgary exhibition game. And Bennett stood in against him. And that's not a small thing to do. And I see in Sam Bennett a guy who, if you tell him this is going to be your role, he's going to play in the National Hockey League at that role for 15 years and make a lot of money and be an important player on a good team.
Colin Fraser is going to be dropping by the podcast here in a couple of moments. Before we get to the 3-time Stanley Cup champion and former gold medalists in the World Juniors of the 2005 Team Canada squad in Grand Forks, let's conclude this segment by talking about one of the nice surprises this season, and it's been a long time coming, and you hope it sustains because it's a lot of fun and it's a good-looking young team. What happened to the Buffalo Sabres? Why are they so good?
First of all, I like to see this because both of us probably saw our share of games in the Odd.
Oh, tons.
And the Odd was a great place to watch hockey. And
straight up and down, you're overlooking the ring. Oh, it's a great place.
I want to tell you that one of the first times I ever went to the Odd, we rented a car, and we went and we parked there. I went as a university student in my first year. We're like, we're going down to the Odd for a game tonight. So we drove down from London.
University from Guelph down there.
And so we
were the same people.
There was a great parking spot in the parking lot. And I was young and I was stupid. And it was underneath a bridge. So I parked there. It was so close and nobody else parked there. And I was like,
that's great.
What's wrong with these people? Why aren't they parking here? And people were just sort of looking at me, and I was like, okay, something's weird here, but I don't know what this is. I think it was 18, 19, something like that. And we get back to, we enjoy the game. We have a great time. Get back to the car after the game, and it's covered in bird poop. I guess the bridge was a nesting area.
Right.
So that's my favorite story about going to the Odd. But Buffalo's a great market.
Yeah.
The fans, they love hockey. They've been in limbo for too long. They deserve this. So I spoke to Jason Pominville yesterday, and he talked about a lot of the things about the change of attitude. Eichel's better. The goaltending is definitely better. Hutton and Ullmark, those guys have given them good goaltending. But it was funny. He was just about to hang up the phone because he was watching his kids practice, and I didn't want to take up.
Is Pominville or Botterill?
Pominville.
Okay.
Pominville's the guy I spoke to. So Pominville was watching his kids practice. I didn't want to keep him for too long. So as he's about to hang up the phone, he goes, "Oh, wait, hold on 1 second." And I go, okay, what's that? He goes, I forgot to mention, this has to be mentioned, Bogosian and McCabe.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers those guys, but think of what we were like without them in the lineup. Just having them there, we are so much better.
Did you see, speaking of McCabe, the pass that Rasmus Dahlin made to McCabe on the weekend? Like Rasmus Dahlin, all of a sudden, he cuts down low,
we were on
comes
the
up.
air.
Yeah, it was a Saturday. It was
And they played
Saturday,
at
Minnesota.
6 Eastern, so we were on the air.
It was a thing of beauty, and I know we are all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for Elias Pettersson and the Calder, and he's been fantastic. 12 goals so far. The last one was an absolute howitzer. Rasmus Dahlin now starting to look really comfy with this league.
Pominville said that yesterday, which would have been Tuesday, they were showing some highlights of his to the team, and there was the one he ripped off the crossbar and the moves he made to get there against Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
He said they were all laughing at how ridiculous they were. Yeah, he's coming.
It's
going to be tough to beat Pettersson this year, though.
It is going to be tough, but what a race this could be. On that, we'll step away. We'll take a pause. We'll come back with Colin Fraser, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, next on 31 Thoughts, the podcast. Elliotte Friedman, this is going to be a lot of fun. This, in a lot of ways, is our first call-back interview, or interview that refers to a previous interview. I think this intro is getting pretty muddled here and maybe a little bit foggy. It is a muddy lake. So let's clear it up and welcome Colin Fraser, former NHLer, Stanley Cup champion, and gold medalist in what may have been the greatest junior hockey team ever assembled, 2005 in Grand Forks. Colin Fraser joins us now. Colin, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and that's a good intro because I like to say I had really, really good timing, and I was in the right place at the right time with all those good teams I was on.
You make your own timing, you make your own breaks, and you're a part of some really impressive squads and some really historic years. I mean, 210 was a huge one, as you know, for the Chicago Blackhawks. You were right there. 205 was a huge one. That was lockout year in the NHL. A lot of players who probably should have been playing in the NHL ended up in that World Junior squad. That was probably the most dominant we've ever seen. We're going to get to all that. And we're going to get to January 25th after that World Juniors as well. And you know what I'm talking about, between Red Deer and Calgary. But first, Kevin Bieksa on this podcast a couple of weeks ago had this to say about you.
So who was the guy, Kevin, on the Kings that you said, man, you are the biggest idiot I've ever met on the ice, but off of it, I actually really don't mind you?
There was that one guy that used to play there, Fraser. You remember that?
Oh, Colin Fraser.
Colin Fraser, yeah.
Oh, hated that guy. And I never really saw or met him off the ice.
Colin Fraser, respond to Kevin Bieksa.
K-Bone, the Sheriff K-Bone. So I listen to your guys' podcast every week, and I hadn't listened to that episode yet. And I had a few people text me being like, oh, Kevin Bieksa, he called you out on the 31 thoughts. So I had to go give a listen, and immediately texted Elliotte after, and something along the lines of, make sure you tell Kevin that the feeling is mutual. Because me and him had some pretty epic battles on the ice, not so much physically, as I never fought him, but verbally, on words that we probably can't repeat on the podcast. But I did add into the text to Elliotte that I put, but ask Willie Mitchell and he'll vouch for both of us that we're good guys and we'd enjoy each other over a beer.
We will make sure that Kevin gets the message. Because you must have had a lot of guys, too, that you, like he said, that you played against and just despised. And then when you sat down with them for a beer, you're like, this guy's not that bad a guy.
Well, we always talk as players, we talk about the guys that you hate the most are always the best guys. The character guys, the guys that battle, they're always the good guys off the ice. Not to say the other guys aren't, but that's what us, I guess, guys that play on the edge a little bit always say. And I've never met Kevin outside of playing against him, but playing for the Canucks. And I was in Chicago, and then I was in LA, and we played him in the playoffs every single year. And the Canucks were always the top team, and they had a bunch of players that, let's say, other players didn't like all that much. With Kevin being one of them, and myself being one of them, I'm sure. So we had some good battles, and I was fortunate to be on the good side of those battles in the playoffs.
You know, you've been part of, as you mentioned off the top, some pretty historic teams. We will circle back to the World Junior Championship in 2005 here in a second. But what was 2010 like? Not on the ice necessarily, but perhaps better phrased, on the bench. I can recall asking Glenn Healy this question, and Glenn worked between the benches, as you well know. I said, Glenn, what's the worst you've ever heard? Like, what series, what game? Like, what is the worst you ever heard? And he said, without a doubt, 2010, Chicago Blackhawks, Philadelphia Flyers. And a lot of it was from the Chicago end. It was relentless. Once that tap turned on, there was no turning it off. Kane, Versteeg, like it was apparently nasty. Colin, how nasty was it?
Well, it's the playoffs is a new season, so it's always nasty. Ben Eager, who is an awesome guy, but he would always be looking for dirt on anybody if the playoffs came into play. Texting buddies, texting people that played with so-and-so, hey, what do you got? Hey, what do you got? And if he heard anything, even if it was half true, he'd be bringing it up like it was factual information. So definitely heated battles. I mean, but you grow up, it sounds cliche. You want to win the Stanley Cup at all costs, like this is what you want to do. And if it gets somebody off their game, then it gets somebody off their game. And if you're taking it personal, well, you shouldn't be taking it personal because we're all trying to do the same thing, and that's win.
I can remember talking to one player once, Colin, who said he had a very specific coach who said before every series, every player on his team was assigned a player on the other team. And it was his job to, as you mentioned, make the phone calls, do the background, get as much dirt on that player as possible, bring it all together for the team, share it all up and down the bench so guys could just double barrel players when they skated by the bench or they're lined up at faceoffs. Ever part of a team like that where the coach would assign you another player to get dirt on?
Absolutely. Now, in Chicago's Q, we'd have to do research on players. With that said, it wasn't so much about the dirt as much as it was about the type of player he was. So, for example, I had at the time Rick Ripien, so I had to do my research on Rick. What kind of player is he? It wasn't so much about the off-ice stuff that we could chirp guys about as much as it was about the type of player he was. With that said, Adam Burish, I don't know if you guys know Adam Burish, but he would always put together these epic presentations with like a school project board and video and really anything he could get his hands on. And it was unbelievable, this stuff. I'm telling you, the funniest stuff I've ever seen. It was, again, whether it's true or not, it made us all laugh.
It sounds very Sean Avery, right? Because Avery used to say that he always did his research on people, and he would do that. But I have to tell you that I had several players over the years say that nobody was less afraid to say anything than Versteeg. And if you've ever called Chris Versteeg, his phone message said, not that anybody leaves messages anymore, but his phone message said, if it's important to you, leave a message. If it's important to me, I'll return it. I always loved that voicemail. I thought it was great. But was Versteeg the most fearless guy when it came to saying anything?
He's right up there. And Steger's one of those, he's a skilled guy, but he's a rat at the same time. And I had the pleasure of playing against him. He was in Lethbridge and I was in Red Deer back in the day. And then Chicago traded for him in the minors. And me and him, competitive guy. Me and him are very, very good friends. And it would be trying to fight each other on the bench, getting after each other because we're such competitive guys. And I'd always have, he's the guy, breaking his stick and taking the extra 2-minute minor, and I'd be losing my marbles on him because he's going down. Steger, we kind of need you on the ice, buddy. You can't be sitting in the box. But he would, he was, and he could fight too. He'd throw bombs on guys. He would, for a small guy, just a competitive guy that, it really is an awesome guy and a good friend. And actually one time he's going wide and it was between the legs, like fancy guy, skill guy. And Joel Quenneville comes running down the bench. Versteeg, if you ever do that again, I'll punch you right between the eyes. You hear me? Right between the eyes. So Steger's sitting there like, oh man, Quenneville hates me. Steger, you play on the power play, you play on the penalty kill, and you play 5-on-5. I'm pretty sure he likes you. Just relax.
Speaking of throwing bombs, I want to get there now. So 205, Team Canada wins gold at the World Juniors. And then in what seemed like, maybe a week later, Red Deer's playing Calgary, Western Hockey League. We've all seen this team celebrating and hugging, and it's a great moment. The country coming together over this World Junior squad. There's no NHL, and all the eyes are on the WJC and in Grand Forks, and it's fantastic. And then Red Deer faces off against Calgary. And I think it's like 4 seconds into the game, Phaneuf and Ladd throw down, and you and Ryan Getzlaf throw down. And it is bombs from all 4 competitors. What happened? What is the backstory on that?
Well, it's funny because it goes to show you how times have changed because there's not really a backstory. We all got along. I don't know if Dion and Laddie got as well as me and Getsy, but he'd vouched that me and him we were friends. There's no issues at all. But this Red Deer Calgary rivalry, we'd play him 15 times a year. And so I try to fight Getsy every game. He's the best player, so I'm trying to get him off the ice. And he would never fight me because he's too good. So Dion and Laddie fight. I didn't even know they were doing it. They just fought right off the opening faceoff. And really, really good fight. 2 big guys that can throw them when they want to. And the next face-off, I say, Getsy, let's go. And he's like, no, man. I'm like, Getsy, listen, if there's ever a time, now's the time. He's like, okay. So we threw down. I think both fights were done 4 seconds into the game. Everyone thinks we all hate each other. What in reality we don't. It's just, I don't know, like you go back. I scout now for the Blackhawks. So I talk to these old scouts and they're like, oh, I remember watching you. And I always follow it up with they don't make them like that anymore, do they? No, no, they don't. It's just a different era. Getsy's I don't know how many points, 100-point guy. He's a Hall of Famer. He's absolutely one of my favorite players I've ever played with and against. And he would throw down, and we fought, and the rest is history, and it makes for a great story today.
Jeff, I want to do some post-career stuff with Colin. Is there any more of his career that you want to do?
I do want to do one thing. Okay. You were part of, Colin, 2 teams where finally the franchise and their fans could exhale. Such a build-up, and then finally they climbed the mountain. 2010, Chicago Blackhawks. 2012, Los Angeles Kings. Long droughts. Kings had never won Chicago. You go back to 1961. What were those times like when finally those 2 franchises climbed the top of the mountain?
Well, with Chicago, the expectations were huge even heading into the season. In 2009, we, exceeded expectations and lost in the conference finals to Detroit. But we were close. We were knocking on the door. So coming into 10, we were, one of the teams that were supposed to be in the hunt. And it's weird because we had all these young players, Versteeg, myself, Brouwer, Bufflin, Laddie, Dave Boland, all these, Dustin Bufflin. We all played in the minors together. We all grew up together, and we all remain friends today because of just kind of coming through the system together. And I don't know, it's like, the city was crazy, and we never really felt the pressure in the sense that we weren't in the room being like, oh, guys, we better win this one. We were just playing hockey. And when you're in the moment, we were kind of riding this wave, and Obviously had a good team, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it's like surreal kind of thing. And I'll tell you, after the season, when we won that cup in Chicago, we could have done anything we wanted in that city. It was free reign on the whole thing, because it was crazy. It was out of control crazy. People always ask me, I said the only city that might top that is Toronto. I don't know if any city could top what we did in Chicago in 2010. So, and
Washington was
Kings
pretty
too,
good. Washington was pretty good last year, though. They threw a hell of a party.
Yeah, they did. Well, it's still social media said you didn't see all the stuff we were doing in 2010.
That's true.
Now it's documented. With the Kings, like 2012, it was such a different story, because we were supposed to have these expectations. And I had just been traded there from Edmonton, and we were struggling the entire season, struggling. And Dean Lombardi would have meetings with us to just be ripping us. And then we get Jeff Carter at the deadline, and it was literally like the light turned on, and the rest is history. We started this trend up, towards the playoffs. So when we hit the playoffs, we were the 8th seed, but we were hot. Like, we were, from the trade deadline on, we were hot, and we were winning, and we were feeling good. So we get Vancouver just riding a high on our play. Maybe not that we finished 4th in the standings, but we were playing so well. We go up on them 2-rip, and it just seems like everything just fell into place. We had no injuries. We were healthy. Nothing phased us, and it was such a different team than the Hawks. We were this big, strong, built for the playoffs type team. And then we had Jonathan Quick in the net, who's, in my opinion, the best goalie. If you want Game 7 on the line, you want John Quick in your net, because he's bringing his best game that he could ever bring. So he was a huge, everyone's a huge part, but he was a huge part why we, rolled through the whole playoffs that year.
Last one for you, Colin. You're beating the pavement now. You are management. You are part of the Chicago Blackhawks organization. Is this your future? Where is your road going to take you?
Well, it's tough to say that, and people always ask me. So when I retired, I was, for 2.5 years, I kind of, plugged around and did nothing, run some hockey camps, hang out with the kids, that kind of thing. I thought I was done with hockey. I just thought, the grind. I'd played since I was 3 years old. I was 31. I was done. I didn't want to be in hockey anymore. And you keep coming back to what do you like and what do you know, and that's hockey. And so I started putting my name in the hat. I called the Hawks, called the Kings, and just some contacts that I had that say, hey, I don't know, wasn't necessarily look for a scouting job, more of a, hey, if you got anything, I'd love to be a part of it. And good timing or whatever, the spot opened up with the Blackhawks, and I jumped at the opportunity and said to my wife, if there's ever an organization to get your foot in the door, it's the Hawks, as they do everything right on and off the ice, a model franchise. And being a part of it, I can vouch for that. So where it's going, I don't have that answer, but I can tell you I'm enjoying it. Watching the game through a different lens, watching some young players beating the pavement and the old, even the junior A ranks and rinks and I'm kind of everywhere, but it's good, and we'll, see where it takes me. And if I can find a diamond in the rough, maybe it'll take me up the ladder pretty fast.
Well, Colin, last one for me. And off air, we talked about how we have 2 kids that are same age, 2010, both play hockey. I've got a 2012 as well who plays hockey, and he plays on a team and he's one of the coaches, Rafi Torres, his son, Ty, who's a nice little player. And I'm always curious about what ex-NHLers say to their kids about playing hockey. So I'm always watching and trying to see what, how Rafi coaches, both my kid and his son as well. You and I both have 2010s as well. What kind of advice, or what do you talk to, or how do you talk to your kid about playing hockey right now?
For me personally, I try to just encourage. And I say that because there's going to come the day when the coach, a Daryl Sutter or a Brent Sutter, is going to be the details guy. Stick 3 feet to the left here. You have to be here. You have to be there. And you're going to become this like robot, so to speak. So as a young kid, don't overcoach them. This is my theory anyway. I want my kid to have confidence through the roof, and ultimately, obviously, to have fun. That goes without saying. But I always say, and call me crazy, but my first question to my son Calder isn't, did you have fun? The first question is, did you work hard? Because that to me is never mind playing in the NHL, but no matter what you do, you have to work hard at it. And we're trying to build good young men versus good young hockey players. Everything else kind of takes care of itself. So I definitely help coach him. He loves the game, which is truly all I care about. He's watching you guys on TV. He reads the hockey news. He plays hockey. He's all about it all the time. And that's what's most important to me. So I don't try to drive home, play defense. Hey, why didn't you pick up that check there? Hey, you should shoot the puck more. I leave that stuff for maybe when they're a little bit older.
You were a left-hand shot. Is he a left-hand shot or right-hand shot?
No, he's a right-hand shot. I got a 2015 that's a right-hand shot as well, and I have a rack of like 400 sticks, and I will not be using any of them, and I'll be buying right-handed sticks.
Well, listen,
love the name Calder, though. Like that.
Calder's a great name.
Yeah. I'd like to say it was after hockey trophies, but it's in fact it's not, and my wife just liked the name, and we had that picked out long before Calder was ever even thought about. So 2029 draft, guys. He's a late birthday, October birthday, so I bought him a year so he can work on his skills an extra year.
And listen, and you know what they say is the right-hand shots. You had 10% of the contract, so good for you. Well done, Dad.
Right-handed D-man. I know exactly what I'm doing. Guys, I'm a scout now.
Thanks, Colin. It's been a pleasure, pal.
Thank you, Colin.
Good stuff, guys. Thank you.
That is Colin Fraser, and that was, Elliotte, a lot of fun. That was a fun conversation. Great guy.
I didn't know how that was going to go. I was kind of hoping he would start lighting up Bieksa, like just kill him. But obviously he wasn't going to do that. It's fun. Okay, can we start that again?
Yeah, sure. Coming down to 3, 2, and 1. That was Colin Fraser, and that was, Elliotte, a fun conversation. I had a good time.
My only disappointment was he didn't come on air and start talking about how awful Kevin Bieksa was and then laugh in the middle and change his mind and start saying great things.
So you want to turn into like Maury Povich show?
That's right. That's right.
We're going to turn into that type of podcast.
You're not the real father. He's the real father. You made an interesting point. Like, you forget how much that guy won.
Tons. Fraser, where he went, winning followed. Right? And not only he sort of downplays it, as a complimentary piece. I was like, listen, man, when you win that much, like, just to make it, like, think about making it on that 2005 team. Okay, maybe the greatest junior hockey team ever assembled. Because there's all those guys that should be playing in the NHL. It's locked out, so those guys are all coming back. He's on that team. 2010 Blackhawks, 2012 Los Angeles Kings. He did a whole lot of not just small winning, but big stage winning.
That would be fun. If someone could tell you could, if I had a choice, like, here's the question. If you could be a superstar and never win, and you could be a complimentary player and win a lot, what would you take?
Oh, wow.
I'd
Probably
take the
complimentary
winning.
player.
I'd take the winning.
Complimentary player.
And the other thing I took out of that interview, first of all, Adam Burish, that's got to be a podcast we do now. And we have to get like $25. We have to get a copy of one of those
100%.
reports.
Those PowerPoints from
That's
Adam
number
Burish.
one.
Yeah.
Number two, what was Chicago's 2010 Stanley Cup party like?
Oh, I can only
If
imagine.
he's saying even with the social media it was crazier than Washington's, what was that like?
I also have been waiting to talk to a hockey player about that, about doing research on another team. Not just, okay, what are their tendencies and what are they all about, but just going and finding material to come at them with.
I guess it happens more than we even realized, eh?
100%.
I knew about that bit with Quenneville where he would tell players you have to research each guy as a player.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that Ben Eager was a researcher.
Yeah.
Like Avery was, because Avery took big pride in that.
Sure did. Let's finish up here, Elliotte, with some hashtag Ask31.
Okay.
I have actually a hashtag Ask31.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to me, and it is courtesy of our producer, Amil Delich. So last week on the podcast, we were talking about Josh Anderson.
Yes.
And squaring up. This is coming off that Jamie Benn scrap, which was old school and beautiful, and it was violent art. And we were talking about what's it like when you square up and there's distance between the fighters. One thing for something, the spontaneous volcanic eruption to happen, and you're just right there, and it happens. It's another to have distance between you, and you're thinking about what is about to happen, and there's distance. And there's that. See, I'm always fascinated with the moment before something happens, which is why I still think the best hockey photograph I've ever seen is Nat Tarofsky's shot of Bill Barilko. We've all seen the Bill Barilko picture. Jerry McNeil's going back and Rocket has his mouth open and the puck is about to go in. And if you look at the crowd, it hasn't gone in yet because the crowd's still all sitting down. It's that slice of life, that split second right before something is happening. Nat Tarofsky captures that perfectly in that Bill Barilko picture. So I'm always fascinated by distance closing and what's it like, that breath before the kiss. What's that like?
When you're going up the roller coaster.
That's the one.
Yes.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Amel, our man at the Leafs Columbus gate the other day, asked Josh Anderson.
I think just, to relax and try to get a good grip is obviously really important. You kind of want to stare him down and try to get that good grip where you want to, really hold him. But I think really it's just about relaxing and you don't really see me actually relaxing in a fight after I get hit once. But I don't know. It's something that I've been used to. Growing up in junior, I fought a little bit. And then, like you said, squaring up against guys, you're not really thinking too much. You're just really thinking throw them as fast as you can and see if you can get them with a couple.
So I'm listening to that answer, and he says you got to get a couple of shots in, and I'm thinking wrong answer because that's only going to make him even angrier. I understand what he's trying to say, but part of me is that's still not a great strategy.
Yeah, but give it up to Josh Anderson.
Give it up to Josh Anderson, A, for doing it, and B, for standing in and answering the question. Yep.
Speaking of answering the question, Tom Mertz Jr., how do you think the players on the Rangers would take it, given their start, if management starts making trades to keep in line with the goal of the rebuild? Would they be angry or understand it in the big picture? This is some found money here for the Rangers.
There's no question that internally that's being asked. What if we stay with what we do? One of the things you want your players know if you're real or you're a mirage. And especially when you've got young players, you don't want necessarily to teach them about giving up. If you're in the race, you deserve to be in the race, you stay in the race. They still have time. There were some trade rumors about Kevin Hayes earlier this year. I think actually Kipper started them all, mentioning that Winnipeg was interested, which makes a lot of sense. But a couple other teams were telling me that Jeff Gordon's a guy who likes to wait closer to the deadline, and he'll take his time. So you have time. It's the old Lamoriello line. If you have time, use it.
Right.
I think it's a great question. And if they're still in it closer to the deadline, it's going to become a very big internal question. But they still have time to see, are they really there?
From Rian Schaefer. What is the next big equipment breakthrough that has game-changing potential, like wood to composite sticks? Now, pause on this for a second, because when this came in this morning, I thought this would be a good one to chew on with Elliotte. So I sent 3 texts out. One to someone who works for an equipment manufacturer, someone who works in that industry. I sent one to a hockey retailer, and I sent one to a hockey general manager at the junior level who's real close, obviously, working with kids. The retailer said helmets because of concussions, obviously.
Yeah, but a helmet
improving.
can't fix concussions.
I get that. Now, and I'll read you some of the answers here. To someone who works for an equipment company. All one-piece equipment. No more shoulder pads, elbow pads, pants, and shin pads. It will all be connected like a onesie. Just slide it on, you get dressed, and you're ready to go. That one is an interesting one. Like Sidney Crosby has, that onesie that he wears. It has like extra shoulder protection. So I can see like a onesie that has protection that covers up areas where like your elbow pads stop between the cuff of your mitt and your elbow. Like I can see that. I just don't know that a full body hockey onesie is gonna
a full body Spanx is coming into my mind right now.
But here's the other one, and honestly, this is why I love this question because it prompted these texts. This is from one of my favorite junior hockey general managers to talk to. This is I had never thought about this until this morning. So thank you very much for this Ask 31. Gloves.
Okay.
Really, gloves haven't changed since they went to shorter cuffs. Now, with the different grips players use for shooting, It wouldn't surprise me if they went to more customized grip and different feel for your lower hand than your top hand. It's kind of weird that it doesn't matter which way you shoot, that your gloves are identical. There aren't any switch hitters that I'm aware of at elite level hockey, so there should be some advantage to this. The idea that all gloves are the same for everybody. What are you, a size 14 or a size 15? That's really your only decision when you get into camp. What size gloves do you? But now that players are using different types of grips, top hand grip, bottom for pushing, top for pulling and all that, the idea that gloves would be personalized as more and more players are now getting involved in shooting instruction and getting shooting coaches, skills coaches that help with their shot. It wouldn't surprise this general manager, and I'm warming to the idea too now that I noodle it through my head, maybe the gloves are the next piece of technology that gets, because your left is the same as your right, as you get it right now. But why?
That's a great idea. I think that's really interesting. One other thing I am aware of is that John Shannon tweeted out a picture of a goalie glove.
Yes.
A couple weeks ago. And I can't remember who said this, but after he tweeted it out, I guess the Players Association saw that tweet and said, we've seen that and there's no way we're doing that. And then I heard it got presented at the GM meetings last week in Toronto. So there's something going on there. But I like your glove idea.
It's not mine. It's one GM. But now that I'm noodling it, I'm like, that makes a ton of sense. And I told my wife about it. She said, it's great for the manufacturers. That way there's no hand-me-downs. Because like you'd have to there's no more hand-me-down gloves. You got to buy a new pair for everybody.
But also on that whole Spanx thing we were talking about, and I know it's not Spanx, but I'm calling it Spanx. There's no doubt in my mind that they are going to change the equipment in terms of how slimming it is and how little it feels on you. One of my favorite football players growing up was Marcus Allen, and they used to joke that he looked like he was wearing a wetsuit when he played the game. And a lot of athletes are like that. They like not feeling like they're wearing anything. And I wonder if that will get there.
Where there was skates, I wonder about skate blades. Because blades have always been about, traditionally, and it is starting to change now, faster glide. Fast glide. With so many guys and various, mobility edge work that they do, I wonder if we're at a place now where skate blades themselves take that next evolutionary step as it relates to technology. Don't know.
This stuff is all
throwing darts.
Interesting to me.
Throwing darts. We'll conclude on this one. Quickie podcast this week, folks. Thanks for being with us. Nolan Brown is plus minus still a relevant stat in today's NHL. I think it matters to know who's on for what, but many disregard it, and I'm unsure why.
There are some people who believe in it. I think Lou Lamoriello believes in it. He's mentioned it a couple of times in passing to me to say that it's something he believes in. Other people do different things. Years ago on Hockey Night in Canada radio, Larry Robinson, when he coached in San Jose, said that the Sharks had a system where if you were on the ice and you were directly involved in a scoring chance, you got a plus. And if you were on the ice and you were directly involved again in a scoring chance against, you got a minus.
Right.
I like that a lot better.
Yeah.
I think the thing that people sort of look at with plus minus is if you get a minus and you're not really responsible, is that a true indicator of your success? So it just comes down to the fact that people believe there are deeper ways to look at this and determine cause and effect, or you at fault or not. So
goal-based metrics are low event. Shots are a high-based metric. You
Yes.
have more information to deal with.
Ken Hitchcock was a big believer in possession. Like who was a reason that we got the puck in the offensive zone for a long time. I think a lot of coaches will tell you they prefer that kind of a message.
And I think a lot of people that are at the high end analytics thinkers will tell you your plus minus has to do with things like your goaltender save percentage
Yes.
and your teammates shooting percentage.
Yes.
Case in point, when Alex Ovechkin had the worst plus minus in the NHL. And then suddenly he didn't.
Yes.
And that was more about his teammates.
Because he's a great defensive player.
All of a sudden. On that, we'll wrap. Anything to add, Elliotte, before we conclude?
I just want to say we have a job shadower in today. Sam is with us, and his mother, who I believe I went to summer camp with at some point, she brought in these great cookies, which have ruined my bikini figure. And I just want to say, Sam, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Sam, why don't you come around this way so you can at least get on the YouTube version?
Now, Sam, just
wave to the camera.
Just
That's Sam.
Just so you know, Sam, Elliotte was at the mall not too long ago. He had a nice polka dot bikini picked out for next summer, and your mom is ruining all of that.
Completely
now.
ruined it, Sam. Yeah. But thanks very much to Susan for the cookies. And Sam, it is where we are finishing taping this podcast at 3:00 Eastern time on Wednesday.
Yeah.
He's been here since 1:30, and he'll spend a good chunk of the night with us.
Is he with us tonight?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Just to see what a joke our jobs are.
It's really easy. Don't tell anyone, okay? You know who's got the easiest one too? Me. I do things like this. I think that was a bad pass. Elliotte, agree. Hey, Berkey, was that offside? Welcome back to the program, and we'll be right back. It's kind of all I do. And every 2 weeks, a paycheck shows up, and someone yells, "Stop thief." On that, we'll conclude. I want to thank Colin Fraser for stopping by. That was a lot of fun. Thanks to you for all the downloads and the eyeballs on YouTube. We'll conclude with Hawksley Workman. Oh, always a thank you to our producer, Emil Delich. Hawksley Workman, this is Battle Fords. Hockley has a handful of shows right before Christmas in Creemore, Huntsville, and Toronto. We're back next week with more 31 Thoughts, the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Another summer wasted in the Battlefords on a banana seat bike with the hockey card in the spokes. A friend of ours who stands up his car by to say that he better get home. He said, "You're gonna get a beating. You're gonna get the beating of your life." Whoa, NutraSweet and Fresca and Pop Shop and all the rest of what a babysitter could afford, with enough negotiation and a freckled smile. Another summer wasted here in the Battlefords. Our dust-coated, freezy-stained lips and lawn darts in the yard. And the richest guy in town drives his new Lincoln drunk on the old dusty streets, balancing a snifter of gin on the edge of his knee. Oh, Rock Road and Tiger Tail and Bubblegum and all the rest of them that a babysitter could afford, with the right negotiation and a freckled smile. They say that wealth is revealed in the teeth. That's why we're all wearing braces and dirty fingernails that a good Kayla wouldn't approve of. Not another broken arm in this heat. He fell bringing popping chips on one handed. We weren't invincible. And the sensei said he'll sit out the tournament. Another summer wasted here in the Battlefords. Dad shakes his head at the car that's been sitting on blocks for years. And the weird kid who smoked 2 cigarettes playing bingo, then his mom came to his rescue. She stood up and chided everyone with a finger outstretched, saying, "You're not the boss of him." Oh, and ring pops, banana runs, Popeye cigarettes.